Good evening, race fans. Welcome to this edition of the Burnin' Rubber Racing podcast for Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. Sterling Price with Justin Palmer and Hal Eastep. Good to have y'all joining us tonight. It's a good day for news. Well, I don't know where I'm going with this, but there is quite a bit of news to talk about in the world of motorsports. But we start with some breaking news that broke about a couple hours ago via Twitter, first reported by Jeff Gluck and Bob Pockris, that Chase Briscoe and Joe Gibbs Racing, the number 19 team, have been assessed an L2 penalty for modifying a single source part. In this case, the spoiler on the back of the car, the rear spoiler, is the concern. As a result, Briscoe has been docked 100 driver points, 10 playoff points. His crew chief, James Small, has been suspended for 4 races, and Joe Gibbs Racing, that team in particular, has been fined $100,000. We're one race into the Briscoe era at Joe Gibbs Racing, and already they're in a giant hole.
Well, it's just negative 67 points, and already negative 10 playoff points. They're fine. Can we go a year where the poll at the Daytona 500 isn't in question in some way? Because modifying a spoiler does make me question it. And Chase Briscoe's got to either have the worst luck in the world or he's got a lot of ideas that people need to tell him to not have, because this is following him from Stewart-Haas Racing to Joe Gibbs Racing now. You can't take the Stewart-Haas out of the guy, and this is a backbreaker to start your season on. This is brutal because it was a strong run in the Daytona 500 that is now erased, and your next 2 good runs erased by this. This is absolutely catastrophic for them to begin their season.
Catastrophic is one way to put it. This is a crater. It's must-win territory now for the 19, barring the appeal. They are appealing this, by the way. I should point that out, as you would. But, we were sitting here on during the Wednesday qualifying session last week, and we thought, dang, how the heck is that at 19 so fast? I mean, the 19 clocked in at 49.249 on that last run, very much outclassed pretty much everybody who was in the 49.3s. And we were just like, how in the world did they figure that out? Well, now we know. Oh, you had Christopher Bell. Oh, in 8th, you had a Denny Hamlin who ended up qualifying in that top 10 as well in 6th. But this 19 team had something else. And I'm a little bit surprised because I'm thinking in the back of my mind, wait a minute, they did a tech before qualifying. They did tech after qualifying. And this was not addressed then? This wasn't caught prior to that? Or nobody in the NASCAR media caught wind that this might be something that happened? I mean, this came out of nowhere. Granted, there was one caveat to everything I've said, in that this car, along with Austin Cindric's car, were taken back to R&D. These were one of the 2 cars that got randomly selected from the field to get inspected. So they got caught with the random inspection by NASCAR, and that is a full, complete teardown. And I was trying to figure out why the 19. Chase Briscoe literally did this a couple of years ago, and it's just like you're trying to do the math in your head of, so like, why is it the 19 that they may try this on? And then you're like, well, Hamlin was the last one who got the big penalty, and he wasn't even his fault, so we might not choose to use him as the guinea pig. And Ty Gibbs, we're obviously not going to do it to him because he's in a big major playoff battle. And Christopher Bell is your best chance to win the title, so I guess that narrows it down. From Chase Briscoe's perspective, this is now the second L2 penalty or above he's received in the past 3 years. And granted, it's a better situation where he can win at Joe Gibbs Racing than he was in Stewart-Haas equipment back in 2023. But this is now a must win. And for them to even get back into territory, it's must win plus 5 more playoff points accumulated somewhere else throughout the rest of the year.
I find it interesting that Briscoe is already in this massive hole to start the year. Although it does, I mean, when you think about it, I thought I read somewhere on, I think it was Twitter, where one of the reporters mentioned that the part in question with the spoiler, that the violation happened during the assembly process, something going with the bolts that attached it to the car.
That does seem like the place where this has been the violation, and this is part of the NASCAR policy of not tampering with the single supplier parts. And this is the same thing that got Chase Briscoe dinged the last time, if you remember, because it was the aero ducts on the engine back at Charlotte and in 2023. And so the bolts, it's the aero, the spoiler, that's all related to the single supplier, the single parts manufacturer, and we'll get a full breakdown of this probably next Tuesday when Holler Talk has their podcast come out. But from what it seems like, the appeal at least is based on the fact that it was damaged prior to, and they were correcting it. And I'm not sure how much I buy that, but for the time being, Chase Briscoe has less points than all three of us combined, and all three of us individually as well. 67 points he's got to make up just to break even. That's like a 3-race deficit to start off the year, possibly even 4. And you're going to a super speedway track at hybrid again, so it's not like you're going to make it up unless you go out there and finish top 5, top 10 and get some stage points, Hal.
You're going to have a really tough time getting this corrected if you're Chase Briscoe and the 19 team. You are not going to have a fun time for the next bunch of weeks. But the important thing, this is what needs to be their mindset. Don't try and get it all back in one fell swoop, because then you're going to go into more of a hole because you try to do too much. And we know what happens when drivers try to do too much out there. The good news, and Chase Briscoe needs to recognize this, you were at Joe Gibbs Racing. This is not as bad of a hole as if when you were at Stewart-Haas Racing. At Stewart-Haas, it felt like there was no way you could recover from this because your equipment was not good enough. You were on a sinking ship. Right now, you are on a ship that usually is on the up and up and doesn't have things like this happen very often, but that equipment can carry you to victory lane. You are a good enough driver to get that equipment to victory lane in time. Don't try to get it back in Atlanta. Don't try to lock yourself in Atlanta, because that's when you wreck yourself on lap 33 and end up out of the race with no chance, and you're still in the same hole, just one race deeper and no hint of improvement. They're going to be okay in the long run if they can get a win. The 19 team of all teams, though, is not the one that's going to get complacent and say we will win, because they haven't in a long time. So it's tough, but they're really going to have to just sit down, take it one race at a time. There's a time to panic. It's called about 15 races from now is when you start to panic. You don't have a win by then. It's panic time. Right now, again, best time to have a penalty, start of the season. You can make it up because you know what you have to do.
Well, usually in the month of May, and there's now official data to back this up, once we get to the Coca-Cola 600, pretty much everybody's locked into place, give or take 2 or 3 spots when it comes to their points position. It was basically saying keep calm and keep it down on keep your head to the floor, basically. And this is not something you can make up as a points gap. You can't get to the top 16 on points with this. And Chase Briscoe is a winning driver. He did make the playoffs last year via a win in Stewart-Haas equipment. And I don't have any concerns that he won't win it, but this is also a penalty that we're going to have to keep in mind when we get to the playoffs as well, if Chase Briscoe is a part of them, because 10 points already in the hole. We're assuming it's a must-win territory, right? And we're assuming that this is, if he's going to make the playoffs, he's going to have to win. You can't go up against, even in our Joe Gibbs Racing equipment, you can't go up against guys like Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, Daniel Suarez on the bubble, and essentially have the equivalent of missing 4 races. You can't have that happen. You have to go out there and win a race. That'll get you at least 5 points back. You'll start at 1995, Abe. But this is going to basically halt any momentum, and you have no points back off of in those playoffs now because you're not getting any regular season playoff points. You're not going to finish inside the top 10 in the regular season championship. I think we can officially rule that out unless they go on a monster run. In which case, at that point, you might as well have 6 or 7 wins in your back pocket, and you don't have to work, and you're might as well end up in 25 playoff points to start off the bat. This is a problem that's going to be with this team throughout the rest of the year, even if they go on the monster run and Chase Briscoe lives up to the hype that all 3 of us gave him going into the year, Sterling.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this team reacts, how they respond to this adversity that's already hampered them to start the season. I mean, sure, a good start, how you start to the season could set the tone for what happens. You can either crumble under the pressure and not do anything productive, or rebound in a big way and at least get a win. Get 2. If they could go on a monster run, but again, only time will tell. We'll have to watch and see how this team reacts. Will this hamper them through the rest of the season? I don't know. I think the team's good enough to win a race at least once, but they have to really get their act together and make sure they don't let this hamper them. Now, if obviously you mentioned they're appealing this, if they go out and win the appeal, and it gets, I don't think it'll get completely overturned, but if the penalties are lessened, if they come back and they reassess and they're not as harsh as these initial penalties are, that's a small victory for them. So they have to just take this on the chin and find a way to keep going.
It would have to be 50 points. You would have to shave off, because even a 75-point penalty, I still think you're going to be outside the top 10 by regular season's end. And so we'll have to see. And this does have an effect where if they don't win in the first 15 races, I think, then it's going to be panic mode in the final 11. And I'm not sure you really want to put Chase Briscoe in that situation all that much.
The good news for Chase Briscoe is there's a precedent for a big team getting a penalty like this. Was the L2s Hendrick got 2 years ago. Early on in the year, William Byron and Kyle Larson both still ended up in the Final Four that year. So it's panic if you don't get enough wins, don't make up the playoff points. But if you don't do that in the first place, you're going to have problems without a penalty anyway.
Yeah. Well, definitely the word of the week seems to be appeals, because we also have appeals not just inside the court of NASCAR, but also in the court of federal.
The court of law.
Yeah, the court of law, federal court.
Yeah. NASCAR is appealing a federal judge's decision to recognize 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports as chartered operations for 2025, while those 2 race teams are suing NASCAR on antitrust grounds. Now, this actually happened last Wednesday, I believe, or Thursday. This was Thursday, before the night of the duels, basically, just before the duel races happened at Daytona. Judge Kenneth Bell issued, when NASCAR filed this appeal. Now, back in December, Judge Kenneth Bell issued a preliminary injunction allowing the teams to race as chartered operations. Bell denied NASCAR's motion to dismiss the entire lawsuit last month. NASCAR's argument, according to Jenna Fryer of the Associated Press, NASCAR's argument is, and I'm reading from the article verbatim here, quote, "Not liking the terms of a contract does not qualify as an antitrust case." That's NASCAR's argument there. The article goes on to say even further, should 2311 and Front Row prevail, it is believed that NASCAR will eliminate the charter system outright rather than renegotiate new charters.
That would be a choice.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that choice would lead to what NASCAR isn't going to like, which is more lawsuits because you did sign a charter agreement with everybody else. If you just eliminate the system as a whole, we've got a whole lot more litigation that will probably drive the show content-wise for the next 5 years. I mean, that's a ridiculous idea. We talked about Pandora's box many times. You have opened it, you cannot close it. That would be closing it, and two teams right now have a problem with the agreement. The rest of the teams will have a problem if you get rid of the system. So it's the most unpopular choice they could possibly make. The charter system we've always talked about is a problem before. It grew to be something that we now see as it helped. It helped some teams out pretty well. It's helped make some teams pretty rich and compete. Um, Doing this during the season, still challenging the right to have these two teams compete as chartered entries. I don't know how they can actually get that to be overturned. I know they have to, I know they want to, and because of that, it's gonna be something they argue for. I just don't see a universe where a judge is going to look at this in an in progress season and say, let's yoink the charter away from them right now. I don't see this working out in NASCAR's favor, but I think they're just exhausting all their legal options.
I think they are as well. I think at this point it's going to be pretty much set in stone that these teams are going to be chartered, and even then, we're past the point where it would have mattered, or in actuality, because guess what? 2311 and Front Row are still going to make every single race from here on out, with maybe, and I mean maybe, the exception of Mexico City. Even then, you would trust the caliber of equipment for both a Front Row and a 2311 Racing. And these are two teams that you would expect potential extra entries to make sure that they're going to qualify against other open teams, because it's more than likely they're going to be able to out qualify an Amerivat or a Garage 66 or a Beard Motorsports if they decide to show up. Whoever decides to show up, they're more than likely going to beat at this point to get into the field. So you really can't really punish these teams anymore because they've already made it. You can't stop them at this point because as they're in, what would be damaging though is the purse payout and how you would be able to divide up the purse, or where the money would be allocated. The 30 teams that are not under this charter agreement, what happens with the other two charters? There's the ones that were bought and agreed upon by Trackhouse Racing, and those are sold to both Front Row and 2311 Racing. What would happen to those? Would those technically be under the charter agreement? So would it be 32 teams getting a payout? Would it be 38 teams getting a payout? We don't know. It would honestly be better, I think, for everybody but NASCAR if this thing were upheld by the previous ruling. That would be the ideal scenario here, but otherwise, Pandora's box gets opened up, and as far as dropping the charters all together, all right, that is a very, 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 very pretty penny that NASCAR would have to pay out at that point, because they would essentially have to buy out the remaining charters. And if I'm not mistaken, that's about $40 million per charter, 36 teams. If my math's not mistaken, gentlemen, that is $1.4 billion. Not millions, billions. $1.4 billion. That is not a situation the France family would like to find itself in. And having to basically pay out $40 million, and that's on the low end of the estimate of what the charters are actually worth, Hal.
Yeah, good luck NASCAR on that one. I think they would much rather fight it legally than just throw $1.4 billion to the teams. It would have astronomical consequences that I'm not even sure we can even begin to parse here if they got rid of the charter agreements, because what would that actually mean for everybody? We've said the charter agreement at one point held NASCAR back, and now I would argue it's pushed NASCAR forward. I don't know what would happen after that, and I'm not sure I want to find out.
I mean, in a way, it's easy to say now that it has pushed the sport forward because now you look at the teams that are competing full time, the competition level is higher than it's been. Like, the saying that you're only as good as your worst team. Say what you want about Rick Ware Racing, but they're better than what Premium Motorsports was, Jay Robinson's team. They're better than what BJ McLeod and Matt Tiff's operation, what Live Fast Motorsports was just a few years ago. But speaking of people who are looking like geniuses, if this charter system goes away, BJ McLeod and others who sold their charters already before they've taken off in value, they're going to look like bandits on this.
Tony Stewart's laughing to the bank at the moment. If that's the case, he's obviously poor Gene would be on the hook like for another $40 million. But they would be making it out like bandits and laughing all the way to the bank. Like, it'd be about like Bobby Bonilla Day to them. And only it would be one time instead of having to go to the bank every July 1st. They're thinking another $1.2 million. Besides that, they would be the biggest winners in this charter system. But you're right. We have criticized this charter system back then because it basically allowed for teams to basically get away with being terrible and no repercussions for it. Rick Ware has been a bottom three team, but NASCAR has allowed them to keep their charters over the last couple of years because they have made some improvements. But teams like Starcom, they're gone. H. Scott, an initial signee, they're gone. And you mentioned Premium Motorsports, they're gone. Levine, they're gone. And there is a point with it, where you counter that by saying, well, yeah, there's only 7 of the 18 initial signees on the dotted line still in this charter agreement nowadays, or even in business still. But it's a situation where NASCAR has made it out with the best, and we have said year after year after year, this is the best field. This is the best field. This is the most competitive field we have ever had. So the charters have worked in that regard. And when the criticisms of the charter were being levied by people like Hal and I, because we were very vocal opponents of it, this was when teams like Starcom were still on the racetrack. BK Racing were still on the racetrack, where you knew they were going to show up and they were going to make the field and they were going to be set and seconds off the pace. It was Derek Cope that brought out the worst of the charter system. But now we're starting to get to a point where talent and team both have to comply, or else you're going to be in the back of the field and there's not a single thing you can do about it.
Yeah, it took getting to this point where Rick Ware Racing, which was the poster child team of what the worst of the charter agreement could bring, they finally, it seemed like, I would say, are taking the sport more seriously. They finally got enough funds to go out and actually try to be not just a back marker, but be competing, say, in the back 20s, which is more than you could say for a lot of back markers in the past. That the parity, I think, that pushed every team together helps out. But you could argue a lot of things like everyone having spec parts now might have also played a part in parity as much as a charter agreement. But it played its role in these teams actually wanting to stick around now instead of, well, getting their meal ticket and then getting out. I don't see a team right now that I'm looking at that I would say is looking for an opportunity to get out. Your closest one would be Hayek, and even they're a team that competes at certain tracks with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. They're not taking weeks off or going out there and just sitting in the back 20 laps down. No teams do that anymore, and that's good to see. I don't think eliminating, again, I don't even know what eliminating charters would bring. I don't know what would happen after that. It's the great unknown I don't want to touch, and it being named as something specific that could happen if this is upheld. I just want to say it does feel like hearing that feels like NASCAR's losing the lawsuit. That kind of thing coming out in a article feels like a sign that they don't think they're going to win.
I mean,
So
they're
I guess the question is, why wouldn't they have settled by now?
I think that I think they've tried to settle. I have no doubt that they've made attempts to try and settle it. I think it might just be the reason why they haven't settled is because of the lawyers that 2311 and Front Row have, and also Denny Hamlin not being afraid to play hardball with NASCAR.
It's definitely worth asking the question, because at this point, if they take it and to the dates that we all are waiting for, and it's going to be a little bit for this to come. It'll be around November, but when and the information comes out, when things start going public, like financial records and everything like that,
That's the
the
key.
point where NASCAR has lost this. Even no matter what the judges say, they still have a bit of control. Once their financial records go public, that's also a Pandora's box that can never be unsealed, because now we're going to know, and it's going to be much easier to track what's going on. We already know what the purse money is from a week to week basis. It's increasing because of this charter deal, but we're going to know everything that, and the judge is going to allow us to see.
That's the day we've spoke of since this lawsuit started, and I would say for NASCAR and its legal team, that is the day of reckoning that they never wanted to get to. I guarantee you're right. They've probably tried to settle. The difference is any other team in the past would have said yes to settling. This team with Michael Jordan at the top, who loves to win everything, he isn't just going to let you settle and walk away with your head held high knowing you didn't have to do something. He wants the complete victory.
We know he'll take it personally.
Yeah.
He's
done it before, all throughout his basketball career. So this is, yeah. I have the theory 2311. I think at Front Row to an extent, but mostly 2311. They are pushing for this to keep going, to ultimately get to the point where NASCAR has to open up their books.
Yeah. I mean, because court of opinion is 50-50 still. Once the books open up, that may be the game changer. And again, we're speculating on what NASCAR's books are hiding. We've got no confirmation on that.
No, we don't have any concrete numbers on that, or I mean, all we could do is speculate, but I would have to imagine that whatever numbers NASCAR is claiming, it's probably, I would think, just putting this out in speculation here, that the numbers are actually a lot higher than what they're saying. The books will reveal that, but the lawsuit has to get there first. And even then, NASCAR is going to make, I'm sure they're going to make efforts to try and settle this. There have been other news that came out. I know we talked about last week, talking about how NASCAR could possibly sell off part of the ownership. The France family could sell off partial ownership of NASCAR to an equity firm. That kind of made me think, is this something they're trying to do as a means of trying to look for a settlement in this case? I mean, it screams that this would be indicative of they are trying to settle.
Well, and if they are trying to get rid of the charter system, I don't care how much money they have. This isn't a $1 trillion industry. If they're going to get rid of the charters, $1.4 billion, I don't think it's something they can do on their own. It would have to come from some third-party investment in order for that to happen. Now, it's a dangerous game. You can ask as any English football soccer fan, and whatever you want to call the football or soccer, you ask them what that means. It's a dangerous slope. When those investments start coming in, you can ask the FIA about that as well. But it's something that if NASCAR is really willing to go scorch earth with these charters, they're going to need a third party to go along with it, Hal.
Yeah, and third party and NASCAR, I don't think we got that report, and I was still trying to wrap my head around it. but it starts to make a lot more sense. You got a lot more money to deal with things like these legal fees that would come about and paying out $1.4 billion and things like that. And again, I've seen it happen in something that has a lot of overlap with the fan base in the WWE, going from a family owned business to owned by something even bigger with a lot of investors. Um, I'm not going to speak quality wise, but it does scare you a little bit to hear, but it might financially, it might be a lot more stable for everybody. I don't know.
It
I
might.
mean, there's still a lot of uncertainty with this, and they need to. It's going to come down to trying to see how this, again, how this lawsuit plays out. Whether it's a settlement, whether it ends up going to trial. NASCAR, at least in the article from Jenna Fryer, it states that NASCAR is prepared for this to go to trial. And I would have to imagine that, 2311 Racing, Front Row Motorsports, Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, their top lawyer, Jeffrey Kessler, and his group, they're ready too. They're preparing for this to go to trial. So, again, the saga continues.
Well, hopefully, this is a less of a weekly occurrence as it was the past couple of weeks of the 2024 season, where we were having this every single week, and sometimes we would even be breaking in news on here from guys like Bob Pockers and Jordan Bianchi. But it's going to be a very interesting thing to follow throughout the course of the 2025 season. Again, the trial is set to be around November-ish. But another thing we will have to keep an eye on throughout the season is a unicorn.
Yeah, we need to explain this because a lot of people asking will be like, unicorn? What the hell's a unicorn got to do with this? They don't understand, Justin. I think you'll have to explain.
So, for the longest of times, we have made the joke on this show that NASCAR has been in search of a unicorn. And what the unicorn is an OEM. Now, NASCAR already has 3 OEMs: Chevy, Toyota, and Ford. They have been like that since 2013 when Dodge after leaving Penske got us down to 2 or 3. Yeah, I'm sorry. And NASCAR ever since then has been searching for this OEM. So, because they have been searching for the OEM that is long, we've joked that it's been a unicorn. It doesn't exist. The 4th manufacturer does not exist. It won't happen. It's not coming because year after year after year, NASCAR says, as we have found a potential 4th manufacturer, and it hasn't shown up. They said it in 2018, 2019, 2020, 21.
Yeah, they've said it for years.
24.
You get the picture. You get the point.
They've said it again in 25.
Yeah. So surely, surely it's not like it's actually going to happen. At least that's what we've all been thinking until an article from Chris Knight of Catch Fence, which shone a light to basically say Steve Phelps might not just be pulling our leg this time. There could actually be some fuel to the fire. According to Chris Knight of Catch Fence, he reports that a 4th OEM may be on the verge of joining NASCAR, and that NASCAR, he confirmed this with NASCAR, the sanctioning body has received a formal submission from a manufacturer looking to join the sport. In that article, it states that Stellantis with the Dodge brand is the leading candidate. So Dodge, it would appear, is making a move to return to NASCAR. Now, Dodge has not been active in the sport for a few years. Dodge last competed in the Cup and Xfinity series in 2012. They also left factory support in 2013 when there were no teams that signed up to take on their car. They put out a model for the Gen 6 era. Problem is no one took it. And their primary suitor that relied on their services, Team Penske, left Dodge to go to Ford starting in 2013. So Dodge hasn't been in the Cup and Xfinity series for a few years, unless you're with an outfit like Mike Harmon's team, who still kept Dodges around for years. They also have not been involved in the truck series through the Ram truck brand since 2016. Ram trucks, they used to be driven quite often. I know it started as the Dodge Ram, and then Ram split off from Dodge in 2010. So you have Dodge and Ram that are both owned by Stellantis. Ram is reportedly interested in getting involved with the truck series again, and they could return as soon as next season, 2026. The article from Chris Knight goes on even further to say Dodge is searching for an engine manufacturer to provide power for a potential Cup Series return in 2028. Say what you want about the unicorn, but this looks like it could be a realistic possibility. This is the most we have heard about a fourth OEM, the most detailed explanation, reporting that we have heard about another OEM getting involved in NASCAR in the last several years.
And say what you will about, the possibility of this happening. Chris Knight would not be putting his reputation on the line if this was not true. So this is almost as concrete as you're going to get within the NASCAR industry. Chris Knight hates posting it. You better believe it's real. Oh, this is a huge, huge, huge deal for NASCAR. We have said that the fourth OEM has been their missing crown jewel for ages. They have wanted to get back to four ever since 2012 when Dodge left to begin with, and it brings further competition to NASCAR. You see it with the TV partners. There's the more TV partners as there are, the better competition there's going to be. It becomes, it forces everybody to elevate their game. And a potential return to Dodge is huge. I would joke and say that Dodge would probably have a bigger pipeline for talent than the Ford camp based on this information alone, because Ford, and at least in the truck series, likes to keep their guys instead of elevating them up to the next level. But Dodge would be huge. And now the chess game's on, because if this is out there, who's looking to jump manufacturer? Who's willing to make that move? If there is a team in the truck series who are potentially could be in the back, maybe mid-pack right now, doesn't have really the funding from a Toyota as a number one team, or a Chevy as a number one team, or a Ford as a number one team, the time to jump is now. Who's going to be willing to participate to make that jump? Who's going to be that number one flagship team? Because that is the golden ticket for one of these truck teams that are not Tricon, that are not Spire, that are not Thor. Who's going to be that one to make the jump? It is huge. And, you rather have more manufacturers than you would have less, because ideally 4 to 5 is your sweet spot when it comes to it. Now, once you get to 6, it gets a little more spaced out and you get some diminishing returns, but 4 and 5 is the ideal scenario, because if one leaves, you still got 3.
I think we've all waited quite a bit of time to get a report like this. Since 2012, we've always had the rumblings, but this was more than a rumbling. This is a tremor that is sending everybody kind of into excitement, and I'm excited too, because we all know what a potential fourth OEM in the Cup Series means. Especially, it means 40 charters. What everybody's hoping for. We like 40 cars in the field. We like that 40 guaranteed entries. Again, that's dependent on a lot of things currently with that lawsuit as well, but a fourth OEM would change a lot of things in the Cup Series. But we got to focus, I think, really on the Truck Series most of all, because that's where it feels like it's real. the Cup Series still feels like a dream. It's in the distance, and I don't feel confident saying they're going to find that engine manufacturer right now. I can't be confident in saying that. But when they're talking about next year for the Truck Series, that's when you go, I can feel confident about that. They put a date on it. Um, what team would choose them? I'm sure there are a lot of teams sitting there basically hoping they get approached because that means your funding goes up quite a bit. You are about to be the flagship, and your team is about to be a lot better. I hope to see that happen, but I am also afraid because sometimes with things like this, you get so close, and then it's like being left at the altar, let's say. I don't want NASCAR to end up being left at the altar because Dodge decided this isn't actually feasible for us. Because Dodge, again, they left 13 years ago, and it's not like things just got more stable all of a sudden at Dodge. It's not quite the scene for them. They've had struggles recently. I don't know how stable of an operation they'll have, but it's at least nice to see someone trying to take the risk.
Well, it's better than Nissan or Honda, which have been rumored as the other potential factors. And since they're having their gigantic merge over there in Japan, that is a huge deal. So having Dodge as the safe bet, if this was Nissan or Honda, I would be a lot more skeptical. But with Dodge returning, I think it's a lot more credible. I think they're they've had their issues, they've had their troubles. Let's face it, pretty much everybody based in the United States, it's in the late 2000s, early 2010s had their problems. But this would definitely be a step in the right direction for NASCAR. Who would that team be? Could it be a McAnally Hilgeman? And although they've got some pretty good support behind them, could it be one of the teams that we're not even thinking of? Yeah, possibly as well. Oh, could it be a Rackley War? We'll have to see. But I think we have a name now for it. I think the next big thing is in this piece. All right, the big piece missing is who's willing to make that jump. And once we get kind of confirmation or a rumor that a team is willing to make a manufacturer jump, I think that is when the timer starts and we can really start taking this as, okay, this is gospel now. It's happening.
It will be interesting to see like how the teams like if this ends up being true, which teams would be willing to jump. Hard to tell right away because like there are some operations where there's going to be questions from the teams regarding, okay, well, we can jump to Ram trucks if they enter, but how competitive are they going to be?
Right.
I mean, sure, everyone has, in the truck series at least, they have Ilmor engines. So everyone's going to, it's for the most part spec components, but will the Ram truck body, will the Ram truck chassis, will they be put at a disadvantage?
But if you're also one of those teams that are, second tier or third tier on the tier list, what more do you really have to lose? Especially if you can become the flagship of that manufacturer.
Right.
It's a long-term investment, and it may be they're not at the fastest out of the gate, but it's a long-term investment that you would be playing for. I don't think any team on a tight money leash exactly. For example, let's go ahead and take a team like a Hallmark Friesen Racing. I don't think they're going to be the ones that make that jump because we had questions about whether or not they were going to make the field. Now, a team like Nice, that's more of a possibility. Or a CR7. CR7 might be actually, now I'm thinking about it, that's your team. CR7 right there. Because as they have Grant Enfinger, they have been a team that has been on the rise. That might be the team that makes that jump because they are a playoff team, but they're not exactly high up in the Chevy camp in terms of their funding and support. That more or less goes to teams like Nice and Spire Motorsports. Hal?
I could see it. I think if we're gonna pick teams to look at, that's probably your best bet because that's a team that has established itself as one. They've made the playoffs already. So if you want to sell yourself to Dodge, Dodge just has to look at the fact that you were a playoff team without them and without all that funding. That would be the team. It's easy for me to really get excited about because one, this is a team that's been here before, or not a team, a manufacturer that's been here before. Whenever it's a team or I'm gonna keep making that mistake because we're talking about teams at the same time. Any manufacturer coming in that hasn't been participating in NASCAR for a very, very long time, I'm very skeptical of because I'm not going to ask, do they know what they're getting themselves into? But when they get in, are they going to be ready for everything that comes with it? Because it's a different NASCAR than what they used to be in. And for Dodge, that is still the case. But easing in the truck series tells me that they have a plan. They have a smart plan. Let's start where we know we want to be. And then we deal with all the charter stuff and finding a cup team, which is going to be a lot harder because what cup teams would want to jump? That's going to be easier to determine years down the line than right now, because right now I don't really see one that's going to be jumping at the opportunity. Last year, I would have said there's one team that would jump at the opportunity. They are a one team operation now. So excited for what the truck series has next year if Dodge is going to commit fully, because again, we did just get the report, and I don't think that Chris Knight would be wrong. I just think plans can change over time.
Yeah.
But in the terms of the Cup Series, years down the line, I'm still not so sure.
You can think of teams easier in the Cup Series that would be willing to make that jump than you would be with a team in the Truck Series. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Putting it simply like that. But again, this is going to be something to follow if if this winds up coming to fruition. I'm sure the discussions have been held for certain. And I would think, out of all the possible OEMs out there, Dodge would seem like a pretty realistic factor, a realistic OEM to throw their name in and say, hey, we want to get back involved with this. So it's going to be interesting between Dodge and Ram Trucks, the Stellantis brand, the Stellantis company trying to get their brands back out there in the world of stock car motor racing in America.
Well, and you even see some of those commercials as well during the NASCAR broadcast. As for Dodge, you have seen those over the past couple of years, but for NASCAR, you don't want to put your eggs in one basket. And NASCAR has tried to be very proactive about getting this fourth manufacturer in because as being in a situation where you don't have more than three manufacturers gets you into a difficult situation, especially when it's only two manufacturers. And this has been a problem with IndyCar over the last couple of years. One of them's been threatening to leave for about as long as NASCAR's been trying to find this unicorn.
Yeah. I mean, Honda, there's reports now via a racer.com mailbag. Marshall Pruitt was answering questions to some fans. It's something that it's a feature they have at least once a week, if not more. But in a response to a question, Marshall Pruitt noted that Honda has what's this statement again? Quote, like 9 toes out the door.
Yes.
From IndyCar. They have a contract to stay in IndyCar, but that runs out after 2026, I believe.
Correct. So they would be down to only Chevy in 2027, and that's a huge, huge deal because and say what you will about Chevy and Honda and all that. I don't think any manufacturer would be willing to take on at least 27 charters plus another 6 for the Indy 500. I don't think any manufacturer would be able to take care of that. And so if Honda's out the door, then it is very much panic time for IndyCar, and they got to do everything they can to keep them in. And that's going to have to start at St. Pete and the ratings that come with it.
Yeah, they're going to absolutely need to keep Honda around because we talked about this. This is kind of the nightmare scenario for IndyCar of having just one manufacturer. That would be terrible for the sport. And you're right, it is going to come down to the ratings because this was IndyCar's big dive into the deep end of getting all your races on Fox. You got to have the results that back that up, because that is what can keep a manufacturer around, because they'll know people's eyes are on our product. They are watching our cars out there. They're watching us win and compete. It's not going to be any good to be on the main network if you don't have main network prime numbers.
Yeah, just something to follow there with I mean, there have been discussions, there have been rumors that Honda has been on its way out of IndyCar for a few years now, between the talks of trying to get hybrids introduced, which hybrid engines, hybrid components are now involved with IndyCar racing, but some other factors involved. And this would be a shame, because Honda has been involved in IndyCar for, oh boy,
It's been a while.
I mean, there was a time where Honda was the only engine supplier for IndyCar. I think 2006 through 2011, it was just Honda. That was it.
Yeah, and I don't think IndyCar wants to go back to that.
No.
You can't afford that at this point. You gotta have competition. Competition brings out the best in you. You can't have a monopoly on one particular thing, and because that devalues the product, that pretty much that gets you complacent. Just look at any Madden in game over the last 5-6 years.
Oh boy.
Ask the Madden fans how they feel about that.
5 or 6, I'd say about 14.
I'm being generous. It's how I decided that after us going on a little bit harder sure on Monday night, I'm choosing peace tonight. Hey, I'm choosing some
There
peace.
is no peace with EA Sports. There is only a war you have to wage on that one.
Boy. Just
Look,
yeah. I also remember when the EA Sports NASCAR games were good, and then look what happened.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. Okay. Okay, yeah. Fine. I'll choose war against Motorsports Gaming, because they also fell into the same boat there.
Motorsports Games.
Yes.
That company, boy, the less we talk about them, the better.
Now we can drag them through the mud again.
We've already dragged them through enough mud.
Yeah.
What else is there to talk about? So we talked about how obviously Dodge or Ram, Stellantis is, it appears that there's interest in getting involved with NASCAR once again. While there is interest in getting involved, there's now an announcement of one previously interested party pulling out of NASCAR effective immediately. And this regards team ownership side of things. Trackhouse Racing and Pitbull have parted ways effective immediately. Pitbull, the musical artist, rapper, whatever you want to call him, he has had a minority stake in ownership of Trackhouse Racing for what, since 2021, when the team when they started?
Basically, basically it was announced that Trackhouse was going to be formed, and then Pitbull came along about a couple months afterward. Because I remember the conversations we had at kind of training, like, all right, this is a new team, this is Justin Marks, where's the money in this? It's probably going to be a back market, and then Pitbull shows up. It's like, oh, okay, hey, this team might actually be something.
I don't have much to say except kind of a shame. He was fun to have around the sport. Mr. Worldwide, proving he was worldwide. But I think what really happened was a man made an investment, it paid off, and it was time to pull out.
Yep. So there were some different statements regarding this. Pitbull on Twitter put out this statement saying, quote, ending partnership with Trackhouse Racing. Over the past 5 years, we've made history by introducing NASCAR to a whole new audience and falling in love with NASCAR fans at the same time. We have made the decision to terminate the partnership with Trackhouse Racing effective immediately. At the time he put this out, this was a couple days before the Daytona 500, where Pitbull was had the headlining concert during pre-race. So he called his time as a part owner of Trackhouse, it is a true honor. Dale. end quote. That was Pitbull's statement. Justin Marks also had a few words to say about the decision regarding Pitbull and Trackhouse parting ways, saying, quote, "This is a great business story. Armando," that's Pitbull's real first name, "Armando came in when we had no certainty of any material success and took a chance to help build a brand. Now that we've scaled up and have new partners, he's been able to be rewarded for the impact he's made. A great investment on both ends. Excited to see what he does next. Dale." That was Justin Marks' statement regarding this. Now, he also had a response to, I guess there were a lot of comments that were saying, like, with Pitbull withdrawing, with Pitbull and the Trackhouse parting ways, there were a lot of comments that seemed to suggest that this was a really tough weekend, that for Trackhouse, that they lost a big backer of the sport. Justin had a response to that on Twitter that he put out a couple days ago, saying, "Someone told me last night, quote, 'Man, that was a tough week for Trackhouse.' I disagree. I think it was the finest hour in the history of our company. I saw people come together as a team with enthusiasm, positivity, grind, and execution. We had a lot of cars to fix, and it wasn't one team or another doing the work. It was all of Trackhouse working together. We had almost 100 guests, and the partnership team executed flawlessly to create a fantastic experience for them. So many storylines, sponsor messages, the social, digital, and creative teams knocked it out of the park. All 4 cars showed great speed." He goes on to summarize how they did with the weekend, which wasn't really the best. They had a couple cars crash out early, and then SVG got damaged in a crash and was basically limping around most of the weekend. But regarding the parting of ways between Trackhouse and Pitbull, there was a lot of conversation of, was this mutual? Did this happen? It seemed to happen really suddenly. I feel like I feel like there's a lot of people reading maybe a little too much into this, because this feels like this was an attempt by both Trackhouse and Pitbull to boost their profiles, to bring in more partners, and they've got it now. Both of them paid off pretty well regarding success and return on investment for both parties, and I guess naturally the time has come for them to part ways.
Yeah, and you want to have something like this happen where, it's a mutual parting of ways. It's a time. It doesn't seem like there's any animosity. There doesn't seem like there's any vitriol in this. I think what's really fueling the fire of this is the comments made by Daniel Suarez in regards to Trackhouse, and how this was a 1-year deal, and how they both agreed that this needed to be a 1-year deal because Suarez was not happy with the team. The team wasn't really happy in Suarez's performances. So they renegotiated for 1 year. And that's kind of, I think, what's fueling the fire is, what Suarez said about maybe not being happy with Trackhouse. I think this was a mutual separating of ways. I think Pitbull saw an investment. He took the opportunity, and now he thinks it's time to get out. I think that's a smart business decision. I respect Pitbull for doing it. I'm curious as to why the press conference he had prior to the 500 was canceled, because he was scheduled to make an appearance in front of the media. But that aside, there have been, incidents where that has been, where you have your celebrity guests cancel at the 500. That happened while I was down there in 2022. So I don't really look into the tea leaves of that all that much. I think it was just a coincidence on that front, but parting of ways. Obviously, a big name investor is leaving the sport, but I don't exactly think that is going to be something that Trackhouse is going to suffer from. There are other concerns I have with Trackhouse that are much greater than I do have with Pitbull not being a part of that team anymore, Kyle.
I agree with that. It's not the biggest deal in the world to me when it comes to that team. The bigger deal is how many cars they wrecked at Daytona and how much they're going to have to spend to fix that. That's my bigger concern over just about everything. As you said, I think it was fueled by that. The other part is Pitbull is a celebrity, and celebrities bring drama when they have a parting of ways in any regard, even if it's the most mutual, no hard feelings type of parting of ways. Oh, people are going to look into it more than that because of the names. Um, in this case, I really think that it's pretty clear. He's a smart businessman, and smart businessmen know you get out while things are really good. You don't wait until they get really bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if Pitbull was a guy looking at this lawsuit, reading some things up. His people were reading up for him, and they said, now might be the time to just get out, just in case things go really bad in the future. It's risk management, and I think that's as far as you really need to look into it. In terms of Daniel Suarez, yeah, they were both right. 1 year deal seems like the best deal for everybody because, man, I don't know what the results are going to look like this year.
I also feel like this can also have a consequence on where Daniel Suarez ends up next season. Because y'all have mentioned it's a 1 year deal that he signed. Pitbull, and not necessarily saying that they're tied really closely together, that Pitbull is the reason Daniel Suarez is in that car, but they have some mutual connections. And now with the Pitbull Trackhouse partnership being, those ties being severed, what does that spell for Daniel Suarez's future at Trackhouse Racing?
It doesn't spell
Because
anything good.
yeah, well, it can't be good. Certainly, I think there's, like his playoff appearance last year certainly helped his case, but you can't hold back what's I mean, you got to look at who else is there. You got Ross Chastain, a perennial playoff contender, except for last year when he missed it. You have Shane Van Gisbergen, a worldwide popular driver from New Zealand, and you've got the next generation in Connor Zilisch waiting in the wings. You can't hold back Zilisch forever.
Well, and the problem with Zilisch, though, and you mentioned great. We know Zilisch is great on talent, right? Let's get that out of the way. We know what he can be. Problem is, he is not even 20 years old, and this is his first full-time Xfinity Series season. He hasn't even run 10 races in the Xfinity Series yet. So that is a problem if, for whatever reason, he only wins 3 races. I really don't think that's going to be enough to justify bringing up the cup immediately. So maybe you do Suarez for another year. Or maybe you hold on to him depending on Suarez's results this season. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But if you're Daniel Suarez, we got to keep the reality of the situation here. Suarez has been on borrowed time for a very long time. He has been the biggest victim of Carl Edwards retiring early in 2016. And we have documented that well. He was at Gaunt Brothers Racing back in, what was it, in 2020? He missed the 500 in Gaunt Brothers. He was the big guy who missed the race. He's at Gaunt Brothers. He's been on borrowed time for forever, and really, you look around the garage right now, I don't think there's really a seat at Spire open. I don't really see a seat at front row open. 2311, that's a joke. Okay, if that's open. And we're looking at teams that are on par or beneath Trackhouse. Ship's full. And the top teams ain't looking much better.
Yeah, I hate to say it for Daniel Suarez, but this is basically on Trackhouse's time. They can decide when Daniel Suarez goes. Daniel Suarez can decide to not be a Trackhouse driver next year, but that possibly means he's deciding not to be a Cup Series driver next year. That's the difference, is that Trackhouse has a plan for when Daniel Suarez is gone. Daniel Suarez, I don't know if there is a plan available right now once he's done with Trackhouse. And when it comes to Connor Zilisch, it is highly dependent on how he does this season. You clearly see by my standings what I think he's going to do this year. I think he's going to wreck shop like he's Ty Gibbs. I think he's going to be that good. And if he's that good, you can't deny him based off his age when he literally just runs through. If he does that, Daniel Suarez is probably out of the ride next year. But if Connor Zilisch is a normal rookie and has a good year and doesn't wow you with crazy stats the way Ty Gibbs and Joey Logano did when they were young drivers, then Daniel Suarez probably has a lifeline for another year. Yeah, I have him win the championship, in case you were wondering how high I am on Connor Zilic.
Yeah. And we all have Connor Zilic, I think, in our final four at the very least.
I believe we do. Yes, because I have him in my final four, and I just want to real quickly pull up also House predictions for or the Cup Series. This is kind of on the fly moment. Again, you how are not exactly very high on Daniel Suarez this year, as far as I can tell. You got him down all the way down in your first four out.
I think he can do well enough in that equipment, but it's not going to be enough to impress anybody is the problem. My thoughts are literally Connor Zilic wins the title, Daniel Suarez doesn't win a race, and Connor Zilic is taking that ride next year. If I were making predictions on performance this year, that's what happens.
I think I have Suarez down in what 21st, I think.
You do. You have him extremely low. I think I have him as highest at 17th. If my first guy outside the playoffs, and this is the reality of the situation here. Connor Zilic, we do think is going to be that next guy. The problem is to quantify the Xfinity number of wins has always been rough, right? How many wins is it going to be that Connor Zilic can be promoted if Daniel Suarez has a bad season? I want to throw that out there. I want to ask at least that question. Because let's say Connor Zilic does not pan out and win 6-7 races like the hype we have given him. Let's say it's only 4 or 5. Is that enough to really promote him to the Cup Series this early, or are you going to have to take a rental for a year?
I think it will be. I think
you think it will be.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think it matters. I mean, sure, we can say he's going to win 7 or 8 races, but that's like, I feel like that's kind of lofty. I think realistically 4 or 5, maybe even 3. Maybe even 3 is all you need. I think it really depends on if Daniel Suarez makes the playoffs or not.
3 is we're entering Harrison Burton territory with 3.
Yeah, and Harrison Burton went winless before he went up to the Cup Series.
No, he didn't.
In the season before.
In the season before, yes.
He went 4 wins, wasn't it, or something like that one year? Then they kept him down for another year.
He went winless the year after. Which at that point I started thinking he needs another year at least in the Xfinity Series, but no, the spot opened up at Wood Brothers and they needed I hate to classify it like this, but they needed a warm body driving that car, and Harrison Burton was there.
I mean, yeah, because that was the whole Matt DiBenedetto situation, which, oh boy, that feels like ages ago. Oh, when that. Hello, Kat. Good to see you have made an appearance on tonight's show, but
little Dexter.
Yeah, Dexter making an appearance once again on our show tonight. But again, it's going to be a very interesting situation for Trackhouse. I think this is definitely something we're going to have to follow. Again, we're now approaching the 1-year anniversary of that 3-wide finish that really kind of kept Daniel Suarez around for the time being this year. This is going to be a very interesting situation they're going to have. And I guess we didn't have it on the sheet 8 here, but also going to be an interesting situation because it looks like the Coda layout has changed again, and turn 6A is looking like an absolute nightmare.
Well, now you have piqued my interest. Now I have to look at this.
It's on Coda's website. They've modified the circuit for the NASCAR race here, and turn 6 looks to be a nightmare. Turn 6A is the corner here. I'm trying to pull it up myself here. I should have pre-programmed it, but yeah, they've modified it a little bit. So as we know, they are not using the FIA circuit. They're going to be using another one. This one, and however, has a very, very, very sharp corner to it. I'm trying to find it because I saw it earlier and on Coda's website, and I can't find it now for whatever reason. It might be safe for next week if we don't find it tonight. That might be on me.
well, as we mentioned, they are going to use the national layout, which will basically take the circuit that F1 uses and take that circuit and chop it in half, essentially, basically eliminating the backstretch.
Right.
Or, well, the long about, I would say 2/3 of the backstretch plus the back half of the S's portion.
Yeah. I, I had it, I lost it. And Steve Eiserman that
Yeah, no, you Gretzky'd it.
I know, I Gretzky'd it.
All right. Well, I'm sure we can, if not now, we can talk about it next week because that's when NASCAR will be heading to Coda for the third race of the season and first road course event. But going to be interesting to watch regarding that, regarding what happens with.
Oh, I got it.
Yep. All right. We'll pull it up then.
Yep. So, the layout's going to be a little bit more different. So,
oh wow, that's
yeah,
oh,
6A.
Hey, hello.
6A.
That's the Fonz corner.
Yeah. So previously they were going to use something around here, and now they're going to cut that 6A corner is going to be.
That's going to be the chaos hairpin there.
That's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see that.
And it was like comparing that with the old national circuit layout, they were going to, usually they would probably turn off not quite to 6A, but they would get to, but that stretch between 6A and 6B, there would be a little left-right chicane, and then they'd go into 6B. But now with 6A, it looks like it's just going to be one really tight hairpin.
Yeah. And so I wasn't blowing smoke out here. Or I actually did see this, and this is actually verifiable. But yeah, turn 6A, that is looking like a dive bomb city corner, and if this race goes to an OT, we've got problems.
Oh, you say problems. I see solutions to some people saying that road courses are too boring. That's going to be a great corner for those people.
How we do not need 5 overtimes at
no, we don't. We don't need it, but some people do, and they're upset with road courses half the time. So you know what? You get what you ask for.
Get rid of the stage cautions, and I'll be
Please.
fine. I know we got rid of them. I know it sucked, but it was more the tracks that sucked and not the actual races themselves.
It was more the cars and the tracks combined.
Yeah. Bad cocktail. Oh, right there.
Yeah. There. Get rid of the stage cautions.
Well, that's going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye out for, as will be any potential further appeals, because we've already mentioned the 19 team, they're appealing, but we've got a couple other appeals that we got to keep an eye out for, especially one on Thursday that we thought was going to happen on Tuesday, but it has been pushed to Thursday.
Yeah, we talked about it in our 500 preview show with how Parker Kligerman crossed the line first and was celebrating a win at Daytona, and then he got disqualified because of the rear of the truck was too low. So Henderson Motorsports is going to appeal the disqualification. That appeal will be heard tomorrow, February 20th. Of course, Kligerman crossed the line first, but then got disqualified in post-race inspection, therefore awarding the win, at least as it stands now, awarding the win to Corey Heim.
It's a very appealing episode.
Also, there were other penalties that were assessed after the Daytona 500. Todd Gilliland and Cody Ware were each assessed 10-point penalties for improper ballast that was found in their cars. So both of those drivers, Gilliland and Ware, docked 10 points as a result.
Yeah, so that was actually caught prior to, I believe, the duels where both of those guys failed attack, and they had the car chiefs ejected as a part of it. And they were having for the ballast not in the proper ballast containers is where the penalty was for those. So both of them get docked 10 points. for that. Obviously, not. I mean, it could be a factor. It could not be a factor or down the road for a guy like Todd Gill and Cody Ware. We're not really expecting that, but both of them were able to make up some decent points in the race itself. So this shouldn't be too much of a penalty.
Do we look into the appeal being pushed back at all? Does that mean anything to us, or is that just something we're looking at as a normal procedure?
I think it's just a scheduling conflict with whoever was on the appeals panel. Oh, if I had to guess, that's speculation on my part, but it'll be a very interesting appeal that we're going to have to follow closely tomorrow. And we'll talk to you about that next Wednesday for our next news show. Oh, again, we're back to two a week, and we might have an extra show next week as well because St. Petersburg is around the corner.
That'll be the start of the IndyCar season, which there's also a little bit of IndyCar news regarding our driver and team news segment.
Yes.
IndyCar now has their full-time driver grid lineup complete. Dale Coyne Racing has officially finalized their lineup. They had already announced Indy Next graduate Jacob Abel as one of their drivers for this season in their number 51 entry. Well, last Friday, Dale Coyne Racing announced Renus VK will move from Ed Carpenter Racing to drive their number 18 entry this season on a full-time basis. So there you go, your two full-timers for Dale Coyne Racing, Renus VK in the 18 and Jacob Abel in the 51. Abel will compete for Rookie of the Year. VK is in his 6th season in IndyCar competition. He spent the last 5 years competing at Ed Carpenter Racing to kind of middling results. He did get a win at the IMS road course in 2021, but his points finishes have been, they've all been inside the top 15, but they've been between 12th and 14th every season.
I'm glad he got a ride because I felt like of all the drivers who could get that seat, he's the most deserving. Not the ideal situation for him, but you don't get picky when there's only one seat available.
Yeah, when there's one seat left, you really don't have a choice. And it's one of those where I was like, how is he not even on the grid yet? He now is. I'm glad he has a ride for that. And gentlemen, with that being said, your picks are due prior to the start of the Sunday race at Atlanta. So you guys have to lock your picks in. I'll have to reassess mine because obviously I wasn't thinking Renus VK was going to be the guy that they were going to go with. I thought that could have been a potential part-time aim shuffle, but Dale Coyne getting with the times. 2 full-time drivers, and whenever they want to have a third, by all means, have some part-time drivers drive. Hey, but I'm glad they are at 2 full-time drivers this year.
Yeah, and on another note, it sounds like IndyCar already has 33 entries lined up for the Indy 500 this year. We'll get into specifics more on that as the Indy 500 gets closer, but that's going to be over the course of 3 months. So we'll talk about that more as the date gets closer. But regarding some other driver and team news, there is more stuff to mention. Hendrick Motorsports has announced they will run 16 Xfinity Series races in 2025. That's a big, big upgrade from what they did last year for their number 17 Chevy entry. Corey Day is going to run most of those races. He'll run 10 races for Hendrick Motorsports in the 17, but the rest of the schedule will be filled out by their Cup Series drivers. William Byron, now 2-time Daytona 500 winner, along with former Cup champ Kyle Larson, will each run 2 races in the number 17, while Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott will each run 1 race in the number 17.
Yeah, this was a pretty good lineup for that at 17 team. Obviously, you've got the Cup guys who are going to be a pain for every single Xfinity guy. And we know how much Hendrick has valued Corey Day as their next big prospect. The one thing that I would be a little hesitant on is no Raja Karuf, which is a little bit of a surprise. I think that would have been a name we would have expected, but I have seen some looks in the terms of the Cup Series where Spire might run the 07 car, or they registered for one of the cars with 07 as the last number. to run as a partial. Like that number is now registered to Spire. So I do wonder if they're going to use that, and that might be for Raja because Raja is a Spire driver. But overall, a little bit confused about Raja not being on this list, but it could be because Spire has bigger plans for him this year or Cup side.
Yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head right there. That would be a name considering the HendrickCars.com sponsorship that's been on his cars or truck so often. I would have expected him to be on that list, but if Corey Day's a guy, good news, Corey Day, if he has really good results, I'm betting that 17 is gonna be more of a fixture next year. Bad news is going to be for Alex Bowman if this year isn't spectacular, is he's going to have to hear Corey Day's name for the next 5 years or so, however long it takes for him to be ready, because we know what car everyone thinks is going to be the one that has the driver replaced. Hopefully Corey Day can put together some really good results because Hendrick Motorsports, if they pick a guy out, there's a good reason for it.
Well, Bowman got off to a good start this year, top 5. He was one of the survivors of the final big one. So even in the backup car, a great job by Alex Bowman and to get started off hot. And we all have some pretty high expectations for him this year, given kind of the heat that his seat has at the moment.
Yeah. Some of it's a little unjustified, but nonetheless, you are driving for Hendrick. There's the expectation to perform really well there. But again, Hendrick Motorsports to run 16 races in the Xfinity Series this year. Perhaps they'll come across Eric Almirola in a few of those races. Almirola is confirmed to run 9 races for Joe Gibbs Racing in the number 19 Toyota. Almirola last year ran 14 races in the both the 20 and the 19 for JGR, winning 3 races in the process and helping their number 20 team for Joe Gibbs Racing make the Owners Championship 4 for the Xfinity Series playoffs. But nonetheless, Almirola is back starting this weekend at Atlanta, where he'll run the 19 Toyota, along with 8 other races this season.
And while we are kind of speaking of a couple of truck guys here in Xfinity, this came off across my timeline. Grant Aimfinger and CR7 are scheduled to have a big announcement scheduled for 3:30 tomorrow. So that could be a sponsor, could be a contract extension. They do have a mile in a photo, so wildly speculate on that. But they have a announcement scheduled for tomorrow. We'll see what that is. Obviously, Thursday will be there, and also NASCAR has a team announcement scheduled for at Atlanta, I think, this week as well.
Yeah, it's scheduled for this Sunday at 11 a.m., I believe.
Right. So even more fuel to the fire for speculation in there. But we also do have some more news on the truck side because, gentlemen, we finally have an announcement. The Kyle Busch Invitationals have been announced.
Don't you mean the races he's running for Spire Motorsports?
What's the difference?
Fair. That's fair. Okay, fine. Kyle Busch is going to run, counting here, 5 races in the truck series for Spire Motorsports. 2 of them will be in the Spire number 7 Chevy Silverado. One of them is at Atlanta this weekend. The other is at Charlotte. He's also going to run 3 races in the 07 for Spire at North Wilkesboro, Nashville, and Watkins Glen. So 5 races for Kyle Busch to drive in Spire Motorsports equipment starting this weekend in Atlanta.
So 4 of them he's going to be the favorite of, and then there's Atlanta.
I mean, he did win Atlanta last season.
I get he did do that. I do have to consider that when making my pick first this week. I guess I got to do that.
Yeah. We'll break down some of the other entries when we get to making our picks. One of those special entries we should mention is Luke Fenhaus for ThorSport Racing. It's been confirmed that Fenhaus will return to ThorSport Racing to drive, quote, multiple races in the number 66 Ford F-150. For ThorSport, obviously, Fenhaus had, I think, 2 starts last season in the truck series. or at least he made a few starts. He got at least 1 or 2 top 10s out of there, which, considering the schedule that Connor Jones had running half the season and no top 10s at all, Fenhouse greatly outperformed Connor Jones. And let's just say there's a reason Fenhouse still has a ride with ThorSport and Connor Jones doesn't. So Fenhouse will run multiple races. I would assume they're going to up the number of races he has in that car. And it sounds like Soda Sense, one of the sponsors for ThorSport, they really like Fenhouse there at the team. Soda Sense has been a pretty big backer of Fenhouse ever since he's been in the truck series for his entries, for his races. So now Fenhouse will have a shot to keep going and have an extended schedule, it appears, running for ThorSport this season.
Yeah, great opportunity for him. Obviously, ThorSport has been the champion for the past couple of years. I don't think we could deny that he's not getting a good opportunity here, and we'll see what he could do. But this is going to be a very good opportunity for him to show off his stuff, and looking forward to seeing him down in Atlanta this weekend for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If I were ThorSport personally, I would definitely try to lock him up for the near future as your own driver full time going forward next season.
I remember have a retirement plan ready to go at some point.
I remember when SRX was a thing and he was the standout star at Slinger.
What?
He was a 17-year-old kid at the time, and now he's mixing it up with the big dogs in the truck series. Love to see it.
Gets a couple opportunities here or down the road as well. His time's coming as well.
Absolutely. Let's see. We already talked about Renus VK, so that's basically all the driver and team news, and all we have left to do now is make our picks. We have 3 races to choose from. All of them are on the NASCAR National Touring Series. They're all in Atlanta this weekend for another drafting track weekend for NASCAR. Let's start with the Truck Series race, the Freight 208 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. There are 32 trucks on the entry list. There would have been 33, but Akinori Ogata and Akinori Performance withdrew their entry. So there are 32 trucks. All of them are going to make the race, it would appear. Let's see. We have, aside from the entries we already talked about, with Kyle Busch in the 7, along with Luke Fenhouse in the 66. William Sawalich is back in the 1 for Tricon. Keith McGee is in the number 2 for the Rayom brothers this weekend. McGee, the Alaska native, driving that car. Michael McDowell back in the 07 for Spire Motorsports this weekend. I think he's made more truck starts this year than he has in the last 15 years combined. Interesting. Further down the list we go. Josh Rayom in the 22 for his own team. Bailey Curry still in the 44 again for Nice Motorsports. Justin Carroll in the 90 for his family's team. I think that's it. Aside from, Nathan Bird in the 02, but he's going to be in that truck most of the year. So there you go. 32 trucks to pick from. Justin, by virtue of the results from last week, where you got the most points out of all of us in the last weekend, so you get to pick first.
Bunched up, thanks to that Jesse Love win and dangerous proposition going into a truck race. But at least I have the Xfinity pick to go with. But for the trucks, it's tough. But I'm thinking I'm going to go Spire, but I'm not going to go with KFB. I'm going to go with McDowell here.
Ooh, okay.
I trust his super speedway prowess a little bit more.
All right. So we have one Michael McDowell pick. Now it's my turn. For me, who will I pick here? This one, it's easy to go Kyle Busch, but I feel like there's a couple other drivers you got to watch for. Actually, a few. Grant Enfinger always tends to do really well at these drafting tracks, but I want you to keep an eye on 2 Georgia boys. Corey Heim is one of them. He got his first career win in Atlanta here a few years ago. But another guy who I think I'm actually going to side with and go ahead and pick, I liked what I saw out of his run at Daytona, where he led the most laps. He
Uh-oh.
in the truck series. I'm going to go with a boy from Talking Rock, Chandler Smith, to get the win at Atlanta.
All right. Locks up Chandler Smith into the playoffs for you, Sterling.
You guys just made my job so hard because I want to say, Wheel, I have to override you. It's Kyle Busch. I want to do that, but I've learned my lesson. I'm sorry, Wheel. Every time I do this, you tend to exact your revenge. So I'm gonna spin. I got 17 numbers on here, and I really hope it lands
Again,
on
I feel
7.
like we have yet to see the wheel.
Do you want to see the wheel?
Yes, show us the wheel this week.
I kind of would. Show us the wheel.
You gotta let me have the permission here.
How do I have permission?
I think
Well, because you
have,
always got permission. I
you-
never have
yeah.
anything to share. Oh, maybe you did, and I'm just actually a little bit dumb. Anyways,
I hit the multiple participants.
uh,
There we go. There we
presented
go.
by
Let's see the
Will
wheel.
Smith. The wheel.
Oh my god.
This is how I've determined it. Oh my god, I'm gonna betray my playoffs. Gio Ruggiero.
Okay.
All right.
We're going with Gio.
All right.
Gio
Stop the share
Ruggiero.
right there.
All right. So amazing that none of us picked Kyle Busch there.
I'm so upset with the wheel right now.
All right. Well, anyway, I mean, Ruggiero, if he drives the way he did at Daytona, this is going to be a pretty solid pick.
Yes, I will give it that.
So, all right, McDowell, Smith, and Ruggiero, the 3 picks for the Truck Series race, the Freight 208 at Atlanta. Now, that race is going to be first. That race, I believe, is at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern time. Now, for the Xfinity Series race, that's going to follow right after that at 5 Eastern time. The Bennett Transportation and Logistics 250 for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And as we look through the entry list for any notable, any changes, Nick Lights is making his first start of the year for SS Greenlight in the 07. Further down, there's Eric Almirola in the 19. Joey Gase in the 35 this week for his own team. Mason Massey making his first start of the year for Alpha Prime Racing in the 45. Mason Maggio in the 53 for Joey Gase. Let's see. Honeyman is still in the 70. Carson Ware and Mike Harmon Racing are back in the 74. Josh Blicky in the 91. CJ McLaughlin in the 92 are back as well for DGM Racing. There's 38 cars on the entry list, so it looks like everyone should make it in the field this time.
Which is a little bit disappointing because I thought some of the cars that didn't show up to Daytona or missed it to Daytona due to the rain would make an attempt here. But regardless of that, guys, this is the easiest pick of the week. Someone wants his win back. Austin Hill.
Yeah, I knew that's where that was going.
Yeah.
Well, now I have to actually think here. So,
come on, you knew I was gonna pick him.
Yeah.
I mean, I figured. I just hadn't put much thought into who else was gonna be racing. But if I remember correctly,
last year came down to a bit of feel.
Right. And then Austin Hill won the first race at Atlanta.
Right.
And then in the fall, I think I want to say it was Austin Hill again. It was. Austin Hill swept the season in Atlanta last year. So can't go wrong with, I mean, you know what? The thing is, RCR really has these drafting tracks figured out. And while Austin Hill won this race last year, it was Jesse Love who led the most laps from the pole.
You're going with the undercut.
I can't help but think, RCR, they've got it figured out. We're going to take RCR completely off the board here, and I'm going to say Jesse Love goes back to start the year.
All right, undercut for Sterling, and how your or 1 through 3 in last year's race are off the board, at least in terms of the spring, because the top 3 last year were Austin Hill, Chandler Smith, and Shane Van Gisbergen.
Pull the wheel back out.
Well, wheels back out. I think you'll like this one, Sterling.
Josh out.
Yeah, pretty messed up, I know. All right, wheel. Please
Spin that
don't.
wheel.
You gotta get the burning rubber logo on it.
Oh, bro.
Let's go.
Oh my
it's
God.
going way out.
Fast pasta.
It's going
Okay.
Alfredo.
Fast pasta gets it done. My playoffs are ruined.
I thought it was going to stop at Sam Mayer for a second, and then I saw where it was going.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so now we've got Hill, Love, and Alfredo. That would be one heck of a story if that happens. Okay, so those are the 2 races on Saturday, the trucks and Xfinity race. Then you have the Cup race, the Am Better Health 400, where 1 year ago we saw an outstanding 3-wide finish at the line.
We did.
So now we have 39 cars on the entry list. Corey LaJoy and the 01 for Rick Ware Racing are back. You also have, as I look down the list even further, JJ Yaley with New York Racing in the 44.
At the Cup. Car clean, and so did BJ McLeod, who will also be entering this race. So some of the guys who didn't show up to the 5 or missed the 500 are going to be in this one, but I don't think I'm going to go with any of them. I think I'm going to stay pretty in-house, and from what I saw at Daytona, I'd be stupid if I didn't pick a Penske. And normally in the beginning of the year, these Penskes like to do this thing, or champions like to do this thing and win early on in the year. And I don't think that changes. I'm going with Joey Logano. Let's lock it up early. He does well at this track. He's the defending winner of it. He won the fall. Penske almost won it in the spring. I think it would be stupid not to go with the Penske here. Joey Logano locks his spot into the playoffs.
All right. Well, it is a drafting track. Man, the Penskes have been really strong at these. So I feel like I also have to go with the Penske driver. I picked Ryan Blaney to win the Daytona 500. I don't think he's won it, or he has won in Atlanta, but it was before they went through their massive reconfiguration stuff. So I could go that direction, but I don't think I'm going to. I'm actually going to go with Austin Cindric.
Oh,
Really liked what I saw out of him at the Daytona 500. He tends to do really well on these drafting tracks. I feel like for a road course or a drafting track, Austin Cindric's not a bad bet. And he finished really well in this race last year in the top 5.
He dominated last year's race. Him and Suarez, that was what got them through to the second round, essentially.
All right. Well, what you've all done is taken 2 names off of my wheel and their numbers, but we got the wheel. This is the proper background, but trust me, it's going to change every single time. Spin!
Spin that wheel.
Do we got logic going on here? No, we don't.
No, that's Todd.
That's how he
Gilliland.
gets into my playoffs. Todd Gilliland will win at Atlanta.
Okay, so the wheel gave you a little faith back there. So we're all going forwards here, or for the Atlanta race. All the blue ovals for Atlanta. This is definitely not going to backfire on us, and Toyota's definitely not going to win this.
Oh, of course not. No way.
Really? All right. Well, there's that. There are our picks for the Cup Series race. Logano, Cindric, and Gilliland are 3 picks. And that concludes our picks for this weekend in racing and brings us to the end of this edition of the Burn and Rubber Racing Podcast. Any final words before we call it a night, gentlemen?
USA beat Canada.
I'll go with a little less of a controversial one for the 3 of us. Mizzou is currently beating Alabama 42-27, and it's 5 minutes to go in the first half. So keep the pedal down, Mizzou.
Don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. Don't put your expectations too high because they're bound to disappoint you. But God, it feels so good that we're beating Alabama. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to jinx
I
it.
know. I know. 42 points in the first 15, not even 15 minutes into the game. That is, woof. That is a offensive clinic right there.
I could say more, but I'm going to stop ahead. I'm going to stop while I'm there. So that is going to bring us to the end of this edition of the Burn and Rubber Racing podcast. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and be kind to one another, and be kind to yourself out there. Enjoy the weekend of racing, everybody. On behalf of my co-hosts Hallie Stepp and Justin Palmer, until next time, this is Sterling Price signing off.